Revenge Films.
I'm married and have a 2-year-old son. It's an ordinary life, but we've been happy every day. My husband, Kyle, works for a company that provides company housing, so I ran into his coworkers often in the apartment building. One day, Cindy, the wife of my husband's boss, Peter, showed up at the door. I said, "Cindy, how are you?" Then she pointed at a photo and said, "You tell me! I know you're having an affair with my husband. Leave him alone and be prepared to pay $30,000 in compensation for adultery." It was out of the blue. I love Kyle very much, and having an affair never crossed my mind. Besides, I'm 26 and Peter is in his 40s, but she accused me of the affair and didn't calm down. It must be some kind of mistake, and I looked at the photo again more closely. Then I noticed something. This is actually a photo of me and Kyle. But she denied it flatly and said, how could I make an excuse like that when she had solid evidence? I knew the photo was surely of me and Kyle, except Kyle's face was replaced with Peter's. It was the same clothes we wore about 2 weeks earlier. Also, Peter is taller than Kyle by 4 inches or so. I took out the clothes that Kyle was wearing that day and showed them to her, along with the photo I had taken on the same day. She looked confused to see them and said, "But this is definitely Peter." I said, "Well, it could be CGI. Look here, the angle of his face is unnatural." She stared at it as if she couldn't believe it, but neither of us knew who would do that and why. We agreed on showing this bizarre photo to our husbands for now. I showed it to Kyle when he got home, but his reaction was the same as mine. The day the photo was taken, we brought our son to my parents' house and had a date in the afternoon. I called and told Cindy about it, and she said Peter hadn't a clue either. But the question remained, who and why? It was creepy, and we all felt uneasy. A few days later, Michaela, another resident of the company housing, came up to me. Michaela was a single mother who worked in the same office as Kyle. She asked me a strange question. "Have you heard the rumor that Peter and his wife were having a problem?" I said, "No, I don't think I have." Then she clicked her tongue as if she didn't like my answer and walked away. I had no idea why she asked me that at the time, but later, when I told Kyle about it, he looked rather serious for a moment. Then he said that he might have a theory. I told Peter and Cindy about this, and we made an arrangement to meet on the weekend. We also invited Michaela, but didn't tell her that Peter and Cindy would also be there. When she saw Peter there, she was like, "Hi, Peter! Oh, it's so great to see you outside the office. How are you?" But when she saw Cindy next, her expression changed like night and day. I showed Michaela the CGI Cindy got and asked Michaela directly if she did it. Michaela then readily admitted it and said something unbelievable. "You got it right. Yes, it was me, but I did it for Peter's sake." "What do you mean?" "Well, you may not know this, but he's been wanting a divorce for a while, but his wife wouldn't let him go, so I provided something that would make her want to leave him easily, so he can be with me." Kyle and I were beginning to be scared of this woman. Cindy looked like she couldn't believe it. Peter said clearly, "That's impossible." It wasn't a lie. Kyle told me that Cindy had been after Peter for some time, which was so obvious that even the people in the office noticed without hearing any rumor. Peter corroborated in front of us, saying that Michaela had asked him out a few times before. But he told her that he was married and loved his wife, and he had no intention of going out with her. But Michaela twisted his words and believed the idea that Peter can't get a divorce even though he wants to be with her. So she thought she had to give him a helping hand and made that fake photo. By the way, why did she drag us into this? Kyle and I looked happy, and she heard from a neighbor that we would go shopping and go out often, and it was easy for her to take a photo of us who looked intimate. If we didn't look so happy in people's eyes, we wouldn't have to be involved in a trouble like this. That made me feel a little confused. None of us was ready to forgive her for what she did. Peter and Kyle told the company about this, and Michaela was fired on the spot. We were going to ask for compensation, but Michaela believed that Peter loved her and refused to listen to anybody else. She didn't seem to realize she was irrational, and we had to contact her parents. After we spoke with her parents, they understood the situation and apologized to us sincerely. They also paid us compensation. They were willing to take her back to prevent further damage, to which we felt relieved. But then she caused trouble again in her parents' house. They sent her to see a psychiatrist for treatment, but she kept saying that Peter would take her in and that she had to be there for him. As a result, she was locked up in a mental hospital. She attempted to escape from her parents' house in the hospital. It was so scary just hearing it. But we finally felt safe once she was locked up in a room. Cindy came to us to apologize for doubting me first. They handed me an envelope with money in it, but we didn't take it. Cindy was a victim too, after all. Besides, Peter and Kyle would go golfing or fishing together in private, and they often ate and drank at our place afterward. So when Cindy saw that fake photo, the story was believable to her. Kyle and I are a happy couple, and so were Peter and Cindy. I don't blame Cindy for being fooled by the fake photo. We agreed to forget about this and move on since we were doing well before, and we want to keep it that way in the future. It was a simple trouble for us, but being stalked by this kind of person is a big deal. It's scary to think that some people refuse to face reality after being rejected over and over again. According to Michaela's parents, she's being locked up in a room, and honestly, I wish she never comes out for good.
My name is Thomas Smith. I live together with my wife, Karen. Karen quit her job about 6 months ago because we got married. Right now, she's a full-time housewife. Now that she's a full-time housewife, she stays at home and does all of the chores for us. Well, at least she tries. However, to be completely honest, she was not very good at cooking. In fact, she was terrible. Up until she got married to me, she had been living at home with her parents. Apparently, she had never cooked before. However, she doesn't like buying ready-made meals from the convenience store or frozen meals from the supermarket. And she also doesn't like going out to eat either. And even though I say this, I also wasn't good at cooking either. As a result, every single day, I was left with no choice but to eat my wife's cooking that I could only describe as torturous. At night, I would come home from a long day of work. My job took up a lot of my stamina, so every day I would come home and be pretty hungry. Hey, Karen, I'm home.
Welcome home, Thomas.
Whenever my wife would greet me when I came home, she would tell me what was on the menu for dinner that night.
Today for dinner, I made some fried chicken and also fried hoppers.
Fried hoppers? What are those? That was a fried dish that I had never heard of before. There were many times in the past that my wife had tried new recipes or would try to get creative with her cooking. She often watched cooking shows and looked up recipes online, so this time I assumed that this dish I had never heard of was something she saw either on TV or the internet. I walked to the dining room. When I sat down in my seat, my wife laid out 10 fried chicken pieces on the table. But as I looked at the plate, I felt like more than half had a different and strange shape. I took a guess that those with the strange shape must be this thing that she called fried hoppers. When I looked at all of the fried chicken and fried hoppers, they were all pretty burnt. But it was an everyday occurrence that my wife would burn food, so I wasn't that shocked about it at all. Thank you for cooking, Karen. I reached over and picked up the mayonnaise. That's because any of the fried dishes she would make were always too bitter to eat on their own. I know that Karen is also busy every day, taking care of the house and doing all sorts of things, and she's doing her best to cook for me every day. So, I need to be grateful I need it. It would be too awful not to touch it and to throw away her cooking that she worked hard to make for me. I loaded the fried food with a lot of mayonnaise and I mixed it into my rice. If I chew her cooking and eat it too slowly, the bitterness of the burnt parts and the smell of the burnt parts would be overwhelming. To be completely honest, I think that plain rice with just mayonnaise on it would still be better than anything that my wife cooked. I always felt bad saying these things. And of course, in the past, I had tried to speak to my wife about her cooking and confront her about the flavors. However, when I did, Karen ended up going into hysterics, and she threw a tantrum right at me.
How can you say that when I put all of my love into making this food for you? If you love me, then you should be able to eat all of this. You should be able to eat all of this love, right? The fact that you can't eat my cooking for you, it must mean that you don't love me anymore.
Karen, of course that's not the case. I'm just saying.
If that's not what you're saying, then show me in your actions that it's not what you mean.
And so, I would pick up my chopsticks and try the food, but as soon as I would eat one piece, my hands would simply stop. Hey, Karen, what do you think about having dinner separately?
Oh, please. Everybody says that when the husband starts eating out more frequently after work. It's a clear sign that they're cheating on you. Wait a minute. Are you telling me that you're having an affair or that you want to cheat on me? That's it, isn't it? And if that's not the case, then why can't you eat dinner that I'm making for you? If you don't eat it, then that means you're definitely having an affair. And I'm going to call my parents. I'm going to call your parents too, and I'm going to tell everybody.
In the end, I simply had no choice. I had to eat everything. I tried to escape from reality with the disgusting fried chicken, and I was remembering the past as I forced the food down my throat. I have somehow managed to eat the 5 pieces of normal-looking fried chicken. All right, all that's left now is this thing called the fried hoppers or whatever she says. What on earth could it be? I've never heard of it before. I kept scratching my head and thinking, but I couldn't figure out what it was that was fried. I naturally grabbed it between my chopsticks and observed it. Huh? What is this? Let me see. Is that a bone? Wait, it looks like a tail. No. Wait, surely not. When I looked closely, on all 5 of the fried things left that my wife had made, there was very clearly a tail on each one of them. Yeah! I was screaming in my head, and the screaming emoji also flashed in my mind. However, there is no way that I would be able to have this reaction in front of the person who made it for me. Hey, Karen, what is this that you said is fried?
I told you, didn't I? They're fried hoppers.
Right, yeah, of course. At this point, it hadn't even been 1 year since we got married. We should still be in our honeymoon phase. I didn't want to hurt my wife. In order to gain myself some time, I stood up from my seat at the dining room table. I decided to go into the kitchen and pour myself something cold to drink. Perhaps because I ate something that was so greasy and fried, I wanted to drink something cold. I also decided to put some ice in the drink, and I went to the fridge. When I opened up the freezer, I noticed that inside of it there was still the pet food that we had gotten for this pet snake that we used to have. When you think about pet food, I'm sure that most people would imagine food that looks like dog food, pebbles, and unrecognizable. However, when it comes to the pet food that we had for this snake, it was different. They were actually little mice that were pale and pink in color. And for the record, mice that were this size were actually called hoppers. Hoppers, as in the same word that I had just heard earlier that evening. Huh? Why is this here? I was confused. That's because we didn't have a pet snake before. I had the snake before I got married, but my wife had said,
Snakes are so disgusting. Just looking at reptiles makes me shake. There's no way I can live with that.
For that reason, I gave my beloved pet snake to my friend, and along with the snake, I also gave all of the snake food that was left in the freezer to my friend. And yet, for some reason, in the freezer once again was the snake's food. I hadn't seen the frozen hopper mice like this in a while, and they looked grotesque. And at that moment, I felt my whole body get chills. I finally understood what my wife meant by fried hoppers. Fried hoppers meant that she had used the hopper mice and turned them into fried food. I went back into the dining room, and I told my wife that I wasn't feeling well, so I wasn't going to finish the food, and I was going to sleep. I dragged my feet into the bedroom. I started to feel sick and dizzy at the same time. The next morning, I wanted to confront my wife about it, but at the same time, I needed to get to work in the morning. And plus, Maybe it was all just a bad dream. Of course she wouldn't do that. I wanted to think. That's how unbelievable it was to me that this was happening. However, if it wasn't just a dream, if it wasn't a nightmare, I have no choice but to divorce her. It had only been about 6 months since we got married. I knew that Karen wasn't used to cooking, so I thought I could at least tolerate if her cooking didn't taste good. I had spoken to some of my colleagues and my bosses about it, and they said things like, "There are plenty of wives out there that don't know how to cook. Honestly, my wife isn't that good at cooking either, so it's not a big deal." And they cheered me up. However, when it came to last night's dinner, it wasn't at the level of not being good at cooking. That day at work, I spoke to my manager and some of my colleagues about the incident with the fried hoppers. And even them, despite their understanding of having wives that weren't good at cooking, they were shocked. They said surely it was just a joke, or they also said, just imagining that is starting to make me feel sick. And amongst the colleagues, somebody said, "Hey, are you sure you're not having an affair? Or you said something that would make her resent you, or that you made her angry about something? No matter how you think about it, it looks like some kind of revenge. It has to be coming from a place of anger." But I defended myself and insisted that I wasn't having an affair and that I was doing my best to be a good and supportive husband to her. I answered honestly. But I decided that day that I was going to get a divorce. First, I decided to speak to my parents back home about it. However, when I explained to them the incident with the fried hoppers, not even my own parents believed it. But that was the normal reaction, because if someone told me that their wife tried to serve them fried mice that was a snake's food for dinner, I would think it was a joke and laugh. But when I pictured my wife taking the mice out of the freezer, breading them, frying them, and then laying them out on a plate, I could only think that she was crazy. I decided to speak to my in-laws about the situation as well, but that made its way to my wife. And when I got home, she was furious at me.
Are you kidding me, Thomas? There's no way in any world that anybody would do that. Not by any standards. That night, you were tired from a long day of work, so you must have had some kind of misunderstanding. And plus, you're the one that said you weren't feeling well, and you didn't finish the dinner and went straight to bed.
As her parents, my in-laws believed my wife, to the point where my father-in-law was worried about me, and he suggested that I take some time off of work and rest my mind and body. Apparently, they all seemed to think that I was the one that had gone crazy from working too much. Ever since the fried hopper incident, before I knew it, a lot of time had passed by. Ever since that one dinner, my wife no longer served any food that was very obviously suspicious. And because of that, I didn't have any evidence either. On that day, I should have taken a photo with my phone, or I should have at least taken a voice recording or something. But at that time, I was so flustered by the whole situation that I couldn't think of that. I tried looking through the trash that night as well, but I didn't find anything. And the remaining hopper mice that were in the freezer that I discovered earlier were also missing. Ever since that day, I started to receive regular phone calls from both my parents and from her parents. Apparently, my wife had spoken to both parties, and they were all worried about my mental health. As this continued, I started to think to myself, maybe it was just my misunderstanding? Maybe just like everyone says, I was so exhausted and something has become wrong with me? I was starting to think this way and question myself. And then I thought, I need to properly apologize to my wife. Seems like I had a weird misunderstanding, and I'm sure that I hurt her by saying those things. This is how I started to think. But then one day, at night, I opened up the laptop that I shared with my wife and opened up my email. I thought it was time for me to clear out the junk mail for the first time in a while. I wasn't thinking much as I ran my eyes over the mail in the trash when I saw an email from an online shopping site. And that email was from a site selling hopper mice that would be used for snake food. At this time, I felt like I had secured the evidence. I explained the situation to my parents and my in-laws, and after the explanation, I asked them to all come over to my house. With them, I decided to confront my wife. My wife had a tendency to throw a tantrum anytime she was confronted, but my goal was to make her confess in front of everybody. And of course, I made sure to record it this time. I confronted my wife with the email confirmation that she had ordered the hopper mice. At the moment I confronted her, she was furious.
What? I didn't do anything wrong. What is so wrong about doing some online shopping? That was a food that they don't carry at regular supermarkets, so all I did was order it online and get creative with my cooking.
What do you mean it was creative cooking? As if anybody could eat that! Not even you had put your chopsticks on that food. Why did you do any of this in the first place?
Isn't it obvious? It's because it was funny. When I looked at your face turned completely pale, I was cracking up on the inside. It was hilarious. Listen, don't you know how boring it is to be a housewife? Every single day is so boring. So if I don't find little things to enjoy like this, I can't do it. And plus, I couldn't wait to break up with a boring husband like you and hurry up and find a more fun person to marry.
And so, just as I expected, we got a divorce. I collected a settlement fee from my ex-wife of $5,000. As a settlement fee, it wasn't much. But I knew that the reason behind the divorce was going to be a bigger hit to my ex-wife anyway. The fried mice was such a shocking story that the rumors started to spread. I heard she's trying to meet a lot of men to get married again, but none of it's going well.
My name is Jessica, and I live together with my husband, Michael. We don't have any children. We both work full-time, and even though we aren't able to live an extremely luxurious life, we were able to live a pretty normal life. Although my marriage was stable, my mother-in-law really seemed to hate the fact that I wasn't giving birth to her grandchild. Every single time that she would see me, she would yell at me and say, "You still aren't able to give birth to not even one child yet? You are such a useless wife, a worthless daughter-in-law." And she would constantly belittle me like this. However, I wanted to say back to her that she wasn't the only one that was being troubled by the fact that I wasn't able to give birth to a child. I asked my husband if we could both go to the fertility clinic and be tested for infertility, but Michael refused. He said that there's no way he would ever do something that embarrassing and never agreed to come with me. Without proper testing, there was no way to know for certain who was the reason for our inability to have a child, but my mother-in-law only blamed me, and her words were hard for me to bear. Not only that, but my husband didn't show any signs of even trying to protect me from his mother's harsh words. Whenever I would try to ask him to help me, he would seem annoyed and told me to just let his mother be. He never even tried to think about my feelings. Days like this continued, and I was feeling down about not being able to have children, and also about my husband's reaction. I was starting to question my relationship with my husband, when one day, I felt like my husband had become even more cold to me than before. As soon as the weekend would come around, he would disappear from the house, and even when I asked if we could go see my parents from time to time, he will tell me that I should just go and see them alone and wouldn't come with me. And yet, despite that, whenever his mother would call, I would have to go to her place, and she would make me help with her chores. But my husband would say that it was my responsibility as the daughter-in-law and said it was a given. Then one day, out of nowhere, my husband suggested a family trip. Because I was being used by my mother-in-law daily, I thought that maybe this was him showing his appreciation, and I was happy. However, whenever I asked my husband where we were going, he told me he didn't care where it was, but just to make a random reservation at any hotel. I was starting to wonder if he really had any intention of going on this vacation with me, but he was the one that suggested the vacation in the first place, so I decided that I should be able to enjoy it to the fullest, and I made a reservation for a hotel. And then a couple of days later, to my shock, he told me that his mother was also going to be coming on the trip. I thought that I was going to be able to finally enjoy some time alone with my husband, but when I found out that his mother would also be coming along, I was devastated. Until the day of our trip, I continued to tell my husband that I wanted to go on the trip alone with him, but he refused to listen to my opinion at all. And without discussing it with me at all, he decided that we would be going on the trip with his mother. And then on the day of the vacation, I didn't want to give up on going on the vacation just because of my mother-in-law, so I packed my belongings and we departed. But then for some reason, I started to realize that my husband was driving the car deep into the mountains. I started to become uneasy and felt like we were going down the wrong road, so I asked my husband if he was getting lost. But then, sitting in the front seat, my mother-in-law and my husband grinned at each other.
Nope, not lost. This is definitely the right road,
he said to me. I started to have a bad feeling, but there was no way that I could just get out of the car this deep in the mountains. And I also couldn't possibly imagine that we would be doing anything in those roads in the mountains. So I sat in the car as he drove. But then all of a sudden, my husband stopped the car, and he said that the car may have broken down, so he got out of the car and went around to the back. I started to panic that the car broke down this deep in the mountains, but then my mother-in-law turned around and yelled at me. "Are you trying to make my son deal with this on his own? You need to hurry up and get out and take a look." So I felt like I had no choice but to do as she asked. As soon as I came around to the back of the car, my husband ran right back into the car and he locked the doors. "Hey, what are you doing? Hey, open up! Open the door!" When I said that, my husband and my mother-in-law were laughing inside and said,
Yeah, right. Around the time our vacation is over, we'll come back to pick you up. So why don't you just hang out around here and eat the weeds in the mountains?
Do be careful that you don't end up meeting a bear or anything that might eat you.
As they said that, to my disbelief, they left me there alone, deep in the mountains. And the car with my husband and my mother-in-law disappeared down the road. I was stunned, but the anger towards my husband and his mother started boiling inside of me, and I vowed to myself that I would get revenge on them. And then, a few hours later, when my husband and his mother arrived at the hotel and walked in, they saw me standing there, and they both turned completely pale.
What are you doing here? How are you here? I thought we threw you out in the middle of the mountains.
Wait a minute. Could it be that she's a ghost? Don't tell me that she died back there.
No, I'm not a ghost. I asked to be picked up in the helicopter.
Helicopter?
That's right. After I was thrown out by my husband and his mother, unluckily for me, my wallet was still in my purse in the car, but I did have my cell phone in my pocket. So I walked around to look for a place where I could catch service, and as soon as I was connected, I made a phone call to a certain person. My husband was confused as to why I had a helicopter and how I was picked up, but I wasn't the one that owned a helicopter. It was my biological father. When I was in elementary school, my mother was troubled by the difference in status with my father, and she chose a divorce. Many years after that, she got married to my current stepfather. From there, I lived a normal and peaceful life with my mother and stepfather, but I had stayed in touch with my biological father, and my mother-in-law accepted this and encouraged it. And this time, for the upcoming trip, I also wanted to see my biological father, so I thought about staying at the hotel that my biological father owned. When I contacted him, he gladly accepted, and he even reserved a really good room for me. That is, of course, because none of us could have imagined that this was going to happen. After my husband disappeared, I contacted my biological father, and I told him that I was left behind in the mountains, and I wanted him to come help me. If I walked about 1 kilometer from where I was standing, there was a huge open plot of land. He said that he would send a helicopter straight there, and that's why I was able to arrive before my husband and mother-in-law. My husband was shocked, unable to wrap his head around what was going on. But then I asked him who this woman was that was standing next to him like she belonged there. That was when my husband gasped and he looked towards me. I could already imagine that my husband had a new lover, and because I was no longer needed, he and his mother decided to just throw me away in the middle of the mountains and go home with that woman. And my mother-in-law was looking forward to enjoying the vacation with my husband's lover, who was a potential new daughter-in-law. And if all were to go well, she probably thought that she would finally be able to have her grandchild. But that wasn't how this was going to play out. My father had already called the police, and because they left me behind in the middle of the mountains, my husband and mother-in-law were arrested on the spot.
The mistress started to say that she had nothing to do with this and had no clue, but there was no way that she didn't know about this plan in the first place, and so she was also taken away by the police for questioning. I also went to the police station after that in order to explain the situation and give my side of the story. But when I arrived, my husband now knew that I was actually the daughter of a super wealthy man, and together with his mother, they came over to apologize to me and beg me to forgive them. And not only that, but with a 180 degrees difference in attitude.
Jessica, why didn't you tell me sooner? None of this would have happened if I knew that you were the daughter of such a rich man. There's no way I would have had an affair with a woman like that to begin with. Look, my feelings just got a little bit lost today, that's all it was. From now on, I'm gonna make you the happiest woman in the world. You can count on it.
He started saying these things that would make me think my teeth were going to fall out, but then my mother-in-law continued. My goodness, I had no idea that you were the daughter of such a beautiful hotel. I think that from now on, we're going to be able to have a beautiful mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship, don't you think? And even if you can't have children, it's fine. You can just adopt, isn't that right? I can't wait to make a lot of memories together with you. Oh, we're going to get along so well. I couldn't understand what she was saying to me. I don't know if they were actually thinking that I would forgive them after they left me to die in the mountains, and at this point, I was over it. But of course, there was no way that my father was going to forgive them for this. When I said that I wanted to divorce my husband, he prepared a lawyer for me that was known as a divorce specialist, and he helped me corner my husband and mother-in-law without any mercy. And I was quickly able to get a divorce. And no matter how I thought about it, it was clear that divorce was the only way to go. Of course, that wasn't all. I used the lawyer that my father had prepared for me, and I collected a massive settlement fee from my husband and his mother. And that was an amount that they probably wouldn't be able to pay back for the rest of their lives. And I didn't forget, I also made sure to collect a settlement fee from the mistress as well. Apparently, she had heard from my husband and his mother that if I were to unluckily die in the middle of the forest, they would be able to receive a large fee for life insurance and live comfortably after that. They apparently even had a plan to say that the reason why I was in the mountains in the first place was because I got out of the car because of a fight between me and my husband, and then I got lost in the mountains on my own. Thanks to all of this, not only was I able to secure a divorce from my ex-husband, after that my ex-husband and his mother were convicted, and they were going to be placed behind bars. The moment that their sentencing was decided, they turned to me and started throwing a tantrum, begging for me to save them. They were crying, but I felt like they had no right to say that after they were the ones that left me to die in the mountains. As for the mistress, she wasn't charged for any crimes, but because my father exposed everything that happened to her workplace and to her parents, they disowned her and she was fired from her job. And with that, she was left with nothing but a large settlement fee to pay. My husband tried to insist until the very end that it was all just a joke, but the moment he brought his mistress to the hotel, he had already buried himself into his grave. Given my mother-in-law's age, she's probably going to spend the rest of her life behind bars and die there. Even if she were to be able to get out, the only thing she would be left with would be her debt. When I was being belittled every single day by my mother-in-law that I wasn't able to give birth, there were times that I wanted a baby as fast as possible, but when I look back now, I think I was lucky that I wasn't able to have a child with Michael. Once we get divorced, he may become my ex-husband and nobody to me, but to our child, he would be their father for the rest of their life, and there was a chance that my child would have to have a criminal for a father. My father cheered me up, saying that there were plenty of wonderful men out there in the world, better than that piece of crap, and so I'm going to try and forget about those three and move forward with my life. My name is Rachel. When I was in elementary school, I was in an accident that left my legs paralyzed. Since then, I've been bound to a wheelchair. I couldn't take part in physical activities, and at school, people treated me like I was fragile, like walking on eggshells. Gradually, I started shutting myself off from others. In junior high, some classmates even began to mock me, but still, I kept going to school because I had a dream. When I was little, I was full of energy and loved playing outside. After I started using a wheelchair, my daily routine changed to reading books outside. The more I read, the more I started to think, I want to write a story as wonderful as this one someday. That's when I began dreaming of becoming a novelist. I studied hard with the goal of entering the literature department at a top university. No matter how rough things were at school, I endured them for the sake of that dream.
My grandfather always stood by my side and supported me. He had started a company at a young age, succeeded in the stock market, and became a wealthy man. He bought me countless books, and thanks to him, I grew up surrounded by stories. After graduating high school, I finally got into the prestigious university I had longed for. When I was 21, I submitted a novel to a literary magazine and won a Newcomers Award, making my debut as a novelist. I recently turned 25. So far, I've published 3 novels and have come to be seen as a promising young author. Sales have been strong, and I've managed to save up a considerable amount. Feeling confident, I decided to buy my own condo. After looking at many places, I found one I truly loved. The day of the contract finally arrived, and I was filled with excitement at the thought of moving from my small apartment into a larger, cleaner space. But when I arrived at the real estate agency, a female employee approached me and I instantly recognized her face. It was Natalie, a classmate from junior high. Back in those days, she had mocked me more than anyone else. As soon as she saw me, she'd say things like, "A wheelchair? What a pitiful life." Then just laugh. During PE class, she'd say, "Come on, just try running." She even tried to drag me out of my wheelchair. She harassed me relentlessly. Of course, I hated her. And now here she was, right in front of me again. Since graduating junior high, I hadn't seen Natalie even once. I never imagined I'd run into her in a place like this. There was a faint hope in my heart. Maybe she wouldn't recognize me after all this time. Holding on to that hope, I took a seat at the counter where I was guided. But Natalie glanced back and forth between my face and my wheelchair, then exclaimed, "Oh, I remember you. You're Rachel, right?" When I replied, "Yeah, that's me," she laughed and said, "Wow, you haven't changed at all. I mean, are your legs seriously never going to get better? Oh, that's so sad." I was genuinely appalled. Natalie hadn't changed one bit since junior high. As I began filling out the contract, Natalie peeked over and saw that my occupation was listed as novelist. She scoffed and said, "A novelist? Bet your books don't even sell." I ignored her and continued writing. Just as I finished, a man who seemed to be her supervisor suddenly approached.
Excuse me, are you the Rachel, the novelist? I'm a huge fan. Could I please get your autograph on this?
He said, holding out a copy of my book. I quietly signed it just as he asked. The man beamed with joy, thanking me repeatedly. Meanwhile, Natalie glared at me in silence the whole time. During the viewing, I had been helped by a different employee, so the process had gone smoothly. That's why I had confidently gone ahead with the purchase. But now, realizing Natalie worked here, a wave of unease swept over me. And that unease soon turned into reality, because Natalie was about to do something truly outrageous. After filling out the contract, all that was left was to finalize the purchase. I was waiting for the real estate agency to contact me. One day I got a call saying there were some final explanations needed before the purchase, so I headed back to the office. As I sat at the counter waiting, Natalie showed up. "Oh, what are you doing here?" I replied. I got a call saying there were some final explanations needed before completing the purchase. That's when Natalie laughed and said, "Oh, that apartment? I went ahead and canceled it." "What? Are you serious? You did that without even telling me?" I exclaimed, stunned. "We don't sell to the disabled. I gave it to someone else." Then she went on. "So what if you're a novelist? At the end of the day, you're just a crippy. Know your place. There's no property for someone like you. Why don't you give up and move into some rundown apartment? That suits you way better." She hurled insult after insult, and then, looking satisfied, she tore up the contract right in front of me. Furious, I stood up and said, "You think you can get away with this?" And with that, I stormed out and headed to my grandfather's house. My grandfather, a wealthy man with years of experience in real estate and investments, was the one person I could turn to for advice. I told him everything. As soon as he heard what had happened, his face turned red with anger.
What's the name of the real estate agency, and who was the employee?
He demanded. When I gave him the company's name and told him about Natalie, his eyes narrowed.
That company manages a ton of my real estate properties, and they treat my granddaughter like this? Unforgivable!
Without another word, he picked up his phone and made a call. He calmly said, "We're pulling all management contracts." Then he hung up and said,
"I'm heading out now."
I followed him out the door. We soon arrived at the real estate office I had been in just earlier. The moment we stepped inside, the branch manager rushed out, flustered.
"Sir, what was that call just now about?"
He asked in a panic. Then my grandfather told the branch manager everything that Natalie had done to me and said firmly,
"I cannot entrust my properties to a company that employs someone like her."
The branch manager immediately bowed his head in apology, but when my grandfather insisted,
"I have already decided to take my business elsewhere."
The manager quickly called the company president to explain the situation. The president rushed over in a panic, called Natalie into the office, and shouted,
"What the hell do you think you're doing? Apologize to the customer!"
He forcibly made Natalie bow her head. What's going on? Natalie asked in confusion. The branch manager said,
"This gentleman manages a large portion of our properties."
I added, "He's my grandfather." Natalie instantly turned pale. When the president found out she had canceled the contract on her own, he exploded with anger.
"You're fired! Don't ever come back to work!"
He yelled, and Natalie begged, "Please don't do this all of a sudden. I don't know what to do." But the president shouted,
"Shut up and get out now!"
With tears in her eyes, Natalie left the office. After that, both the president and branch manager apologized repeatedly to my grandfather and me, promising to thoroughly retrain their staff. My grandfather agreed to forgive the company this time only, but he never forgave Natalie. Using his connections, he made sure Natalie wouldn't be able to get hired by any other real estate company. After being fired, Natalie found herself unable to support herself. Desperate, she searched for a new job, but was repeatedly rejected by real estate agencies when she sent out her resume. One day, in a panic while driving home from the employment office, she rear-ended the car in front of her, causing a chain reaction accident. She was then hit with a huge compensation claim. Burdened with debt and forced into a wheelchair by the accident's after effects, Natalie began to resent me deeply. She started insulting me on social media, spreading false rumors that I had somehow caused her accident and that I was unworthy as a writer. When I discovered this, I sued Natalie for defamation. As a result, Natalie was also ordered to pay compensation to me, which only added to her mounting debts. Now completely overwhelmed financially, she found herself unable to cope. She began to suffer mentally from the stress of adjusting to life in a wheelchair, couldn't find a job, and is now destined to spend the rest of her life being chased by debt collectors. As for me, I was able to move forward with the condo purchase as originally planned, and I'm now living comfortably in my new home. I can't say I've forgiven what Natalie did to me, but since she was made to pay compensation, I no longer hold a grudge. What happened with Natalie, I've decided to store it in the back of my mind. After all, it makes for great material for a future novel.
My name is Jay. I'm 32 and work a full-time office job. I live with my wife, Alice. We've been married for 1.5 years now. Finally, the big news. Alice is pregnant. I'm going to be a dad, finally. I've always loved kids and wanted one of my own, so I was over the moon. Right away, I started stopping by stores after work to pick up baby clothes, toys, anything that caught my eye. When one of my coworkers found out, he teased me a little and said, "Whoa, slow down. You've still got a long way to go before the baby's born. That stuff can wait." Even Alice and our parents said something similar, but I couldn't help myself. If I saw something cute or useful, I'd buy it. That's how happy I was. I felt like I was on top of the world. But apparently, Alice didn't feel the same way. She seemed nervous, restless. I caught her staring at our joint savings passbook one night. That money was something I'd been setting aside since I started working. 10 years of savings meant for our future family.
We've saved up a good amount,
she said, still looking at the numbers. Yeah, especially lately, we've been cutting back to prepare for the baby, I replied. I figured she was looking at it to ease her anxiety a bit. I didn't think too much of it. Less than a month later, Alice suddenly told me,
I want to have the baby back in my hometown.
Back home? I asked, setting my bag down as I had just walked in the door.
Yeah, there's a good hospital near my parents' house, and I'll feel more comfortable with them nearby.
That makes sense, I nodded. Her parents live pretty far from us. Okay, you're the one giving birth, so whatever makes you feel safest, I'm on board. When are you thinking of going?
Next week, maybe? The sooner the better.
Next week? That's pretty soon. You've still got a few months left, right?
Yeah,
You'll be staying there the whole time?
I think so. I'll feel more at ease that way.
That's a long time. Still, it's her first pregnancy. I figured she must be feeling all kinds of things, so I said yes. While Alice was staying with her parents, I texted her every day, but her replies came only once in a while. Worried, I even called her parents to check in. They told me she was doing great, totally healthy, and in good spirits. Apparently her mom was handling all the housework, so Alice had plenty of free time. They said she often went out during the day. If she has time to go out, shouldn't she have a minute to reply to a message? I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. Work had been hectic, so I couldn't visit her as often as I wanted. Still, I carved out time, made the long trip, and went to see her. But lately, I hadn't been able to meet her even when I did make the effort. I'd always let her know in advance when I was coming, but she'd be out saying she had plans to meet friends from her hometown or something like that. It started to feel off, suspicious even. Still, I didn't want to upset her as she was close to her due date. I didn't want to add to any extra stress. I called her and asked gently, "Hey, would it be okay if I was there for the birth?"
No, I don't want anyone seeing me while I'm giving birth.
But I'm your husband.
Exactly. I love you, and that's why I don't want you to see me like that. There are some things you shouldn't have to see.
Before I could say another word, she hung up on me. A few days before her due date, I got a call from her dad. He sounded panicked. "Alice is gone. Do you have any idea where she might be?" What? What do you mean she's gone? Alice was supposed to have been admitted to a nearby hospital 2 days earlier to prepare for the birth, but it turned out she hadn't been admitted at all. Her parents had no idea. Apparently, Alice had firmly told them, "Don't come visit me at the hospital, not even once." So they figured she was just overwhelmed and irritable before the delivery, and they gave her space like she asked. But as the due date got closer, they started to worry. Her dad decided maybe we'll just stop by once just to check in, and that's when they found out she was never there. When we went to the hospital, we found out that Alice had never been admitted there. "She's heavily pregnant, so I doubt she could have gone far," her father said before hanging up. He was going to search nearby. I left work early and rushed to my in-laws' house. When I arrived, they were just about to head out. They had apparently gotten a lead. Someone said they'd seen Alice at a local birthing center. We headed there together, but the staff at the center looked puzzled.
Alice? She gave birth to a healthy baby boy and was discharged 5 days ago.
We were stunned. What? Discharged? None of us, neither I nor her parents, heard anything about this.
You haven't even seen the baby yet? She told us she was leaving early because she couldn't wait to introduce the baby to her husband and parents.
The staff said, looking just as shocked. Then where is she? Just like that, Alice, who had returned home to give birth, had vanished without a word. We filed a missing persons report with the police, but neither Alice nor the baby could be found. Still, I couldn't give up. I took time off work and searched the area around her parents' home again and again. But there was no trace, no clue to follow. If the police couldn't find her, how was I supposed to? I even hired a private investigator, but that ended up being a waste of money. Right now, I can't afford to hire another one. Maybe things would be different if our joint savings were still intact, but that too was gone. I realized the money had vanished around the same time Alice did. She must have taken it. She left the birthing center on her own, holding our newborn baby in her arms. Part of me didn't want to know the truth. I was scared of what I might find. But even so, I did everything I could. I even left letters at her parents' house just in case she ever came back. Over a year had passed when my in-laws finally said it out loud. "It's been more than a year without any word. She's not coming back. We have to move on." They looked like they had aged a decade in that 1 year. Alice's and the baby's disappearance had become a huge topic of gossip in their hometown. The neighbors' prying eyes and whispered speculation had taken their toll. They looked visibly worn down. At their request, the missing persons report was withdrawn. Time kept moving forward, but the tiny clothes and toys we'd bought for our son remained untouched. Where are they now? Why did Alice vanish so suddenly? I had never even met my son, and I wanted so badly to see him. Years passed. Eventually, I decided to go through the baby clothes and toys. He wouldn't be able to fit into such tiny clothes anymore. He was probably too old to play with toys like these now. Finally, I made the decision to throw them out. They had never been used, just slowly worn out by time. 10 years had passed since Alice and our child disappeared. I was now 42, still single. After losing my wife and child the way I did, I couldn't bring myself to marry again. I had no desire to. One Sunday morning, I was lazily watching TV alone when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and found a boy around elementary school age standing there. Even though it was the first time we'd met, it didn't feel that way. "Hi, I'm Alice's son." The name of my wife, who had disappeared a decade ago, came from the boy's mouth. What? I stared at him, shocked, and then he said something that shook me to the core. "Dad, I'm your son." My son? I looked at him more closely. His features resembled Alice's. He said he was staying with my in-laws now. He'd found one of the letters I had left at their house, and that's how he found my address and came here. Just recently, he had been sent to live with my in-laws. Before that, he'd been living with Alice and another man. He'd always believed that man was his real father, because that's what Alice had told him. Then one day, she dropped him off at her parents' house and disappeared again. Another disappearance? Seriously? I was beyond fed up. But this time, the private investigator actually found her, and DNA testing confirmed that the boy who claimed to be my son really was my son. So I took him with me and confronted my wife and the other man at their apartment. Both of them came out when we knocked. I yelled at her. "If you wanted to be with that guy, why didn't you just divorce me first?"
Because it was all such a hassle. Besides, every time we met, you'd start whining and complaining, remember? That's why I took the money and disappeared. It was just easier that way.
You seriously did something this insane just because it was easier? Do you realize how many people you hurt and worried for the last 10 years? Me, your parents, everyone! She was unbelievable. Honestly, the most terrifying thing in the world might be just how selfish people can be. What I learned that day scarred me. It was trauma-level truth. I filed for divorce. Then I sued both my ex-wife and her lover for $19,000 each in emotional damages. Turns out my ex had been lying to the guy, telling him he was the real father. When the truth came out, he dumped her immediately. Her parents didn't help her either, naturally. She's apparently working a part-time job now just to pay off the $19,000 she owes. Having been abandoned by both her lover and her parents, she no longer had the strength or means to disappear again. When I was in the 9th grade, there was a girl in our class who was being horribly bullied. Her name was Carrie. She had a slight disability in one of her legs, nothing major, but it made her walk with a bit of a limp. Other than that, she was just a regular junior high school girl. The bullying started when one of the boys in class began mocking the way she walked. At first, it was just verbal abuse, such as calling her things like cripple and making nasty comments. But when Carrie ignored it and didn't react, they seemed to get angrier and took things further. Eventually, it escalated. Her textbooks were thrown out behind the school building. Her gym clothes ended up in the toilet. Stuff like that started happening more often. Still, Carrie didn't say a word. She just endured it quietly. And maybe because of that, a rumor started to spread around school. Back in 8th grade, Carrie had been out sick for almost a whole year. But then a rumor started that she had actually gotten pregnant and had an abortion during that time. To make matters worse, the leader of the bullying, this total scumbag, claimed the baby's father was her own brother. The girls in class started saying disgusting things like, "She's sleeping with her brother, that's so gross." They treated her like she was some kind of filthy creature. Carrie probably knew that if she said anything, it would only make things worse, so she kept her head down and stayed silent. But that doesn't mean she was completely alone. There was one person who stood by her, Michael. Whether it was at school, on field trips, or during any kind of group activity, Michael always stayed close to Carrie, trying to make sure the bullying didn't reach her. He was always there for her. Whenever someone tried to bully her in front of him, Michael would step in and shield her without hesitation. Back in middle school, Michael was the serious, glasses-wearing nerd type, so he wasn't exactly popular with the girls. But he was smart, top of the class, and held positions like class president and vice student council president. Teachers liked him, so he was mostly protected from outright bullying. Still, maybe the leader of the bullying and his gang didn't like how perfect Michael seemed, and eventually they started targeting him too with their cruel behind-the-scenes harassment. They did the same kind of things to Michael that they did to Carrie. One time they even pushed him off an embankment on his way home from school. He was nearly seriously injured. He sprained his ankle and could barely walk, let alone attend school. But even then, Michael kept coming every single day. Carrie kept telling him he should rest and recover at home, but Michael wouldn't budge. I was worried too and asked if he was okay a couple times. He just said, "This is nothing." Then he added, "What really bothers me is the thought of Carrie being harassed behind my back when I'm not around. I can't stand that." It's true. No matter how much Michael tried to protect her, he couldn't stop everything. Especially that awful rumor, the one about her getting pregnant by her own brother. It actually started spreading with even worse details. People were saying it wasn't just her brother, but that she'd slept with multiple guys and didn't even know who the father was, so she had to get an abortion. Because of that, Carrie wasn't only bullied at our school anymore, kids from other schools started harassing her too. That's probably why Michael didn't want her to be alone for even a day. Eventually, graduation season came. The classmates who had bullied Carrie so badly suddenly stopped. Maybe they realized it could affect their high school recommendations and grades, but I honestly believe that the only reason Carrie was able to keep coming to school and graduate despite all the cruel things that were said and done to her was because of Michael. After that, Michael got accepted into the prestigious high school he had hoped for. Even after graduation, he would sometimes visit Carrie at her home. But after he left for college in Tokyo, he only came back to see her about twice a year. At the coming-of-age ceremony, neither Michael nor Carrie showed up. Most people assumed they had drifted apart by then and didn't really keep in touch anymore. Around that time, there was something we were all vaguely thinking, but no one wanted to say out loud. What if Michael and Carrie try to get revenge? In fact, we were all adults now. Some of us were married, some even had kids, and as we matured, we started to really understand just how cruel the bullying had been back then. So when news spread that Michael was planning to attend the class reunion, and we were all around 27, some of us were like, what do we do? Should we apologize? But then that one loser guy, still single and working construction, went around telling everyone, "There's no need to apologize. That was so long ago." And surprisingly, most people went along with it. Still, people can be harsh. When it came down to choosing between the elite guy from Tokyo or a small-town construction worker, everyone sided with Michael in a heartbeat. Turns out, after graduating from that top high school, Michael went on to attend one of the most prestigious universities in the country, one everyone had heard of. At the reunion, he showed up in a sharp suit, contacts instead of glasses, and now standing at 6 feet tall. He looked nothing like the Michael we remembered. For a moment, no one even recognized him. The whole room buzzed with surprise. When people found out he had the highest income of anyone in the class, some of the girls who had once joined in on the bullying started switching sides without hesitation. They started flirting by asking him, "Do you have a girlfriend? Are you married yet?" Some even threw themselves at him. Michael smiled politely and said, "I'm good." While still engaging in light conversation, he was clearly unfazed. He spent a while chatting with a few women from class, but what really stood out was how that one jerk who had caused so much misery back in the day was completely ignored by everyone. It was honestly kind of pathetic. A few years later, that same guy had a workplace accident at his construction job. He slipped from a scaffold, he wasn't wearing a safety harness, and fell 20 feet. He landed head first and was in a coma for several days, but eventually he woke up. When he finally woke up, the first thing he saw was someone in a white coat standing beside his hospital bed. It was Michael. With no smile, he simply said, "Long time no see." As it turned out, after working as a doctor in Tokyo for a few years, Michael had transferred to the hospital owned by Carrie's father. And yes, Michael had married Carrie. The two of them had built a happy life together. Carrie had always had a weak constitution, and shortly after middle school graduation, she developed complications from her condition. Because of that, she could hardly attend high school and ended up spending most of her late teens and early 20s in the hospital. Later, it came to light that the stress caused by the constant bullying had played a major role in triggering her illness. When Michael found out, he was in his second year of high school, and from that moment on, he decided he would become a doctor just for her. Even after he entered med school, Carrie's condition would sometimes take a turn for the worse. Whenever that happened, Michael didn't hesitate to take time off from school and rush to be by her side. Still, he poured himself into his studies more than anyone else. He graduated at the top of his class and officially became a doctor. As for the guy in the hospital bed, his life had been spared, but he was now permanently paralyzed from the waist down and would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. After explaining all of this, Michael stood silently for a moment and finally said, "I guess everything you did eventually came back to you. That's karma for ya." In that moment, I suddenly remembered something from back in middle and high school. How Michael never once fought back, no matter what we did to him. He always just endured it with a quiet, "It's fine," like nothing was wrong. But even as a kid, I remember catching a glimpse of something in his eyes, a kind of hatred so deep it made me freeze. And now, lying there in that hospital bed, a terrifying thought crossed my mind. Could it be? After we parted ways that day, I later heard that several of the women who had been happily chatting with Michael at the reunion ended up getting fired from their jobs, one after another. At first, I wondered how something like that could happen. Then I found out that a rumor had started circulating, that back in middle school, they had mentally tormented another girl, pushing her to the edge. Because of that, they were labeled unfit for society and let go. Some of them, I heard, spiraled into depression or even became shut-ins. And when I remembered how Michael smiled so warmly at those very same women who used to torment Carrie, that same uneasy thought came back. What if he was only talking to them to gather information? Of course, I don't have any proof, it's just a theory. Now, Michael is happily married to Carrie, and they're living a peaceful life. But sometimes I wonder, maybe he had been quietly waiting all this time for the chance to get back at the people who hurt her so deeply. I don't know if what he did, if he really did anything, was right or wrong. But I do think this. Those people will probably spend the rest of their lives being looked down on, just like they used to look down on others.
My name is Betty. I'm a housewife living with my husband, Caleb. Since both of my parents worked when I was growing up, I often helped out with the chores and cooking from a young age. I grew to love cooking, and even before we got married, I would cook for Caleb. He always praised my food, saying it was delicious, and that only motivated me to get better. After we got married, I decided to become a housewife and fully support Caleb, who works full-time. He often bragged to others about how hard I worked to take care of the house and cook every day, but there was one person who didn't take that well: his mother. My mother-in-law lives just about 15 minutes away by car, and when we visit from time to time, she always throws passive-aggressive comments my way. Caleb told me not to take it personally. She's just a strong personality, but it's hard not to let it get to me. According to him, she used to be more reserved when his father lived at home. But ever since he left for a long-term work assignment, it's like she's dropped the act and started showing her true colors. One day during a visit to her house, she said she was going to order takeout, but Caleb immediately said,
"Why don't we have Betty cook something? I've been wanting you to try her food."
So, just like that, I ended up preparing a home-cooked meal. While I was in the kitchen, his mom came and stood next to me, watching me chop ingredients. Then she said,
"What kind of knife skills are those? You really think you can call yourself a proper housewife with that technique?"
Of course, Caleb couldn't hear her from the living room, so I just kept my head down and tried to ignore it. I finally finished cooking, and we all sat down to eat. After just one bite, she blurted out,
"What is this disgusting food? This isn't how we cook in this family. I'll make it myself."
She stormed into the kitchen and started dumping seasoning into the soup I had made. When Caleb shouted,
"What are you doing? It was delicious! Why would you ruin it like that?"
Then she snapped back.
"Are you that clueless about taste? Wake up already!"
She then brought her version of the soup to the table, but the soup was so salty and overpowering, it was basically inedible. Caleb said,
"You ruined her amazing soup! What were you thinking? You know what? Forget it. We're leaving."
Then his mom shouted,
Fine. If you're going, take all this food with you. If you leave it here, I'm throwing it out. It's too disgusting to eat.
She handed us some containers to pack the food. I never imagined my cooking would be insulted that harshly. I fought back tears the entire way home. When we got home, Caleb immediately said,
I'm so sorry, honey. Let's just stop going to my parents' place for a while.
So we decided to put some distance between us and his family. According to him, his mom was the jealous type, and she probably hadn't expected my cooking to be that good, so it stirred up some sort of rivalry in her. He told me not to let it get to me and did his best to comfort me. I tried to take his advice and not dwell on it. After that, whenever his mom reached out, Caleb kept his replies short and cold. He always said he was busy and made a point of not going over to his parents' house. Still, we couldn't exactly skip the big holidays, so about 4 months later, we decided to stop by during the Obon holiday. Caleb tried to reassure me, saying,
Dad's home for the holidays too, so Mom will probably behave herself for once. Don't worry.
But to be honest, the memory of our last visit still made me nervous. When we arrived, Caleb's dad greeted us warmly at the door. It was the first time I'd seen him since New Year's, and he looked like he'd put on a bit of weight since then. He and Caleb were excited to see each other again and immediately got caught up in conversation. As evening rolled around, the two of them started drinking together. We had originally planned to go out for dinner, but Caleb's dad said,
Let's just stay in and eat at home.
So we made a last-minute trip to the grocery store, just me and his mom. That's when she muttered under her breath,
Guess I'll have to choke down your awful cooking again.
I couldn't help but blurt out, Wait, I'm cooking? She shot back,
You expect me to cook all by myself? What kind of daughter-in-law would make her mother-in-law do all the work?
Unbelievable. After all the awful things she said about my cooking last time, now she wanted me to cook again? I was furious, but I decided then and there I'd prove her wrong. I was going to cook something so good she'd have to admit it tasted amazing. I chose one of Caleb's all-time favorite dishes and focused all my energy on making it perfect. We got the ingredients and headed back to the house, but when we returned, Caleb's dad was gone. Apparently his boss had called and he had to run back to the office real quick. I figured I'd try to finish cooking before he got back and without asking his mom for any help. I was determined. Just watch me, I thought. I'll show you what real cooking looks like. When Caleb saw the dinner table filled with all his favorite dishes, he lit up and said,
Wow, this is an amazing feast!
He looked genuinely thrilled. Just then I heard his mom click her tongue in irritation, but I ignored it and sat down. Since the food was getting cold, we decided to start eating without waiting for his dad to get back. The moment his mom took a bite, she muttered,
Ugh, just as disgusting as I expected.
Caleb immediately snapped.
What do you mean by disgusting? This is way better than anything you've ever cooked.
At that, his mom's face turned bright red, and she completely lost it. She turned her fury on me and started yelling.
You can't even cook a decent meal. What business do you have being a housewife? If you've got time to make this garbage, go get a job. I should have never approved of this pathetic marriage in the first place.
Caleb and I were both so stunned by her outburst, we couldn't even take her seriously anymore. We just glanced at each other and gave a half-hearted, awkward laugh. That's when the living room door opened and Caleb's dad walked in. Without saying a word, he sat down, took one bite of the food, and suddenly exclaimed,
Wait, did you buy this at some fancy department store? There's no way you made this yourself.
But it didn't sound like he was exaggerating or trying to flatter me. He genuinely meant it. Then he turned to his wife and, still clearly impressed, exploded.
You're calling this woman useless? If anyone's useless, it's you!
That's when Caleb muttered under his breath,
Oh no, it's over.
Apparently his dad was usually calm and easygoing, but when he did get angry, it was terrifying. Caleb told me later that when he was a kid, his dad's scoldings often left him in tears. His mom knew this too, which is probably why she had always tried to keep her real personality hidden whenever he was around. But now, the mask had slipped and there was no going back. Caleb's dad was so furious he launched into a relentless lecture that didn't let up. In the end, he actually kicked her out of the house. His mom started crying and said,
It's just because Caleb always praises Betty so much, I got jealous. I promise I won't say awful things anymore. Please forgive me.
She apologized sincerely, but his dad's anger didn't calm down at all.
I don't want to see your face! Get out of here, right now!
He shouted, tossing her bag outside and then locking the door behind her as she was forced out. Once she left, his dad immediately returned to his usual calm self, praising my cooking and slowly finishing every last bite. Caleb then told his dad,
Actually, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. That's why I hadn't been seeing Mom.
His dad replied firmly,
You don't have to deal with her anymore.
So the three of us ended up having a relaxed dinner together before heading home. I wondered what would happen to his mom after that, but Caleb said,
When Dad gets that mad, no one can stop him. We just have to leave it alone.
So I decided not to contact her. The next day, during our Oban break, while Caleb and I were relaxing at home, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened it, there stood his mom, looking completely defeated. She begged,
My husband won't let me back in. I'll apologize for everything. Please talk to him for me.
But Caleb just said coldly,
That's what you get. I don't care anymore.
Then turned her away. Even though she kept pleading, Caleb firmly shut the door on her and said, Let's just leave it be. After that, his mom apologized to his dad many times, but he wouldn't forgive her. Once the Oban holiday ended, his dad took all the house keys with him back to his work assignment. Apparently, his dad had been putting up with how bad his mom's cooking was for years, but since moving away for work, he'd come to appreciate good food and had become quite a foodie. He told her,
Before you come back next time, you'd better get your cooking skills up to Betty's level. After that, we'll see what happens.
With nowhere to go, his mom lost her place at home and stopped receiving money for living expenses. She ended up taking a live-in part-time job in a ryokan kitchen. Since she could only do simple tasks like washing dishes, she's been working hard and learning the basics of cooking on the job. My husband and I are curious what decision his dad will make when he comes home for New Year's. Ever since his mom moved out, we've had peaceful days with no more bad feelings. My husband says he wants his mom to really reflect on what happened and apologize properly. All in all, I just hope we can keep things peaceful by staying away from her for now.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.